Hello everybody, my name is Sean Smallwood and I will be doing my future scanning presentation on agriculture with the subcategory of urban gardening. Urban gardening or urban agriculture includes the cultivation, processing, and distribution of agricultural products in urban and suburban areas. Now, that's not necessarily limited to just plants. There is also livestock involved in some parts of the world with urban gardening. I'm mainly focusing on plants in this presentation, but I have included some examples of how livestock has been incorporated into urban gardening. And now I would like to start with a brief history of urban gardening. So, urban gardening has been going on for a long time. It's not this new thing that was just invented. I want to start out with ancient Egypt back in 2500 BC. Fruits and fruit and nut trees were used in cities to provide shade from the hot sun, but also to provide extra food and greenery within growing city walls. Fruit and nut trees were also integrated into tombs and holy spaces. And you can see in the background, I've actually included, there's some hieroglyphic paintings that I found online to include that have been discovered in Egypt to depict all of this. And then in 3500 BC, Mesopotamia, farmers began setting aside plots of land uh, to help provide for their growing cities. One of the seventh wonders of the world are the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Even though the Hanging Gardens have never been found, there's a lot of historical evidence that elaborate gardens and irrigation systems were integrated into several ancient Mesopotamian citadels. Moving forward, we have 1100 AD. Let me move myself a little bit there. There we go. We have 1100 AD. The Aztecs built a complex garden canal system tied to their, or garden and canal system tied to their irrigation waterways called chinampas, I think. I might be butchering that. These gardens started as small scale floating gardens, but they eventually were used on a large scale within urban areas to sustain population growth for the Aztecan Empire. And this is a model that is depicting what those gardens would have looked like. In the 18 and 1900s, after industrialization, London became a global hub but faced many issues that even today's modern cities face, such as poverty, slums, and inequality. And this resulted in allotments and public parks to maintain adequate amounts of land within the city for residential use for a small fee. So you can kind of see this is the beginning of where modern community gardens kind of started, what they have evolved into anyway. Moving forward, we have um, Germany in the 1800s also began to do the same practices that London had implemented, not so much necessarily because of poverty and inequality, but this was more of a way for children to have green spaces to play in outside and be still involved in nature while living in the city. But it eventually became more oriented around becoming plant and vegetable gardens as a necessity because of the upcoming wars that will happen. So they started in the 1800s and then they, evolved for necessity to provide food in a war-torn Germany after both of the world wars. Um, Germany was not the only country that was affected by the wars. Um, in 1910 to 1940, what is known as victory gardens or war gardens were promoted to boost food supplies during the First World War and the Second one, in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and a lot of other countries, as a lot of supplies and food were prioritized for the war effort, and they were sent to soldiers overseas. So these victory gardens, they were cultivated by citizens on both private and public land. They provided food, and they also boosted morale and patriotism. Community gardens not only give people the opportunity to grow food, um, that they might not otherwise have due to their small space or whatever living circumstances prevent them from having their own gardens, but you're also working together in groups with other people, promoting a sense of community, and that is what is increasing the moral and the patriotism. And it's nice to be outside and working in the sun. It's good for you. Get your vitamin D going. Um, in the US, Victory Gardens were responsible for 41% of all of the consumed vegetable produce in the year 1943. So you can see how much of an impact these gardens have and how much of a necessity they really were. That's almost half of the food well, half of the vegetables anyway in the United States at the time being produced out of these community victory gardens. Okay, and up to current times, we have Japan, and Japan is really good with urban gardening. It's an island country, so they are faced with the problems that many island countries are faced with. They only have so much land, and once that space runs out, you really don't have anywhere else to go except for up. Um, within Japan's cities, you can find rooftop gardens that have rice paddy fields. They have bee farms. You can find vegetable tree gardens under, not tree gardens, excuse me. You can find vegetable gardens underneath Tokyo Metro. And there are skyscrapers that have entire floors filled with farm animals. Can you imagine? I mean, we think of skyscrapers and I think of like office buildings. I think of homes or like high-end hotels or whatever the case may be when you think of large skyscrapers. But you walk in, and let's say, for this photo, for example, you can pop up to the 13th floor of a skyscraper and there's a goat farm. You have kids here petting goats. I think it's awesome. I would love to see that in person. That's something that I did not know. That's something that I learned about urban gardening during the process, was the fact that animals are actually involved in this process. So we're going to start with the country that I believe is leading the way and that I found the most research on with urban gardening, and that is Singapore. I personally have been to Singapore. I had the pleasure of spending about a month and a half there about 12 years ago, give or take. And it was just gorgeous. It was absolutely covered in plants from head to toe. Nothing was industrial about the city. Like if you went in there, if there was like a metal handrail, there were plants growing up it. There were vines covering things. It was beautiful. To give some detail about Singapore, it's extremely densely populated and small. So the entire country is only about 279.6 square miles. It's tiny. Speaking from personal experience, you can drive from one end of the country and be at the other end in 45 minutes or less, depending on traffic. The population is huge. There's 5.454 million people. which is slightly less than the city of Hong Kong, which is at 7.413 million, to give you an idea that the city of Hong Kong is actually bigger than the entire country of Singapore. Um, Breaking that down, that means per square mile, there's approximately 20,000 people. 90% of the agriculture has to be imported, while 10% is produced in the country. There's only a total of 1% of the total land that is dedicated to conventional farming. The rest is urban gardening. Currently, Singapore has a plan in place called the 30 by 30 plan. And that 30 by 30 plan entails using technology and urban gardening to produce 30% of its own agriculture by the year 2030, hence the 30 by 30 name. Currently, Singapore has 238 farming licenses that they've issued, to include 109 coastal fish farms, so those are regular fish farms, 87 leafy vegetable farms, 19 land-based fish farms, so I would consider those like urban garden farms, 10 general agricultural farms, 7 bean sprout farms, 4 chicken egg farms, and 2 quail farms. So, I mean, that's massive in that tiny country. Imagine that amount of urban gardening that's taking place. So we're going to talk about Cityponics, which is Singapore's first rooftop hydroponic farm. It's located on top of a car park, and the structure services almost every neighborhood in Singapore. So you can see there's a satellite view, and then you can see a ground level view over here on the left, and then to the right there is a rooftop view. And in the next slide I have a better broken down image of that rooftop view. It's an urban garden, but it's a vertical rooftop garden, which I think we're going to be seeing that trend a lot in the future, because again, if you run out of land, you can't go out, you have to go up. It only makes sense. Here you can see that design I was telling you about. This is the actual hard structure of the car park, and then there are rows going back and forth of the hydroponic garden, and I believe they're 4 levels high. They're planted in PVC pipes, and there are holes drilled in the tops of the PVC pipes that the plants are grown in, and then the nutrient solution is circulated through the PVC pipes while the roots just grow freely in that solution. And I have another cool photo that I found of a skyscraper in Singapore, and you can just see, I'm going to move myself out of the way here. You can see this entire building from the top down, and it really is this beautiful in person. Like, there are plants everywhere. And the government supports this. They support urban gardening. People are not necessarily paying for these all out of pocket. They have a large amount of funding and grants available for urban gardening to help realize the goal of the 30 by 30 plan, which is a government initiative. It's a government-sponsored initiative. Moving on to the next slide, I want to talk about different types of urban gardening. As we just saw, we had a rooftop garden, and we also had a vertical garden. A vertical garden is a vertically suspended panel on which plants are grown using hydroponics. Vertical gardens, they can be freestanding or attached to walls. The one that we saw was attached to a roof. Other names for vertical gardens include living walls, green walls, plant walls, or moss walls. I don't know if these are terms that you've heard. They are used in trendy, high-end interior design shows. Living wall is a big one that they like to throw out there. That one is more for looks, like moss walls and whatnot, but they can be functional as well by growing food. Vertical gardens can be indoors. They can be used, you can buy grow lights, or you can buy shelving units that actually have grow lights built into the bottom of each shelf, so the layer below that is getting the light. And then they have trays in them in which the liquid nutrient solution can be circulated through, or you can plant them directly in soil. And they have self-watering systems, so you can start from the top, right? And then the water will come down through all the layers as you water from the top down, and eventually end up in a drip tray at the bottom, so you don't have a huge mess. You can use these for balcony gardens as well in apartment living. Um, it's really cool. You're not when you think about vertical gardens and you find what is shown online, you're not limited to that, because these can be made from simple materials, and they can basically be made and engineered any way that you think that they can. There's no like set rule for it. And here's a photo of a self-watering system that I found on Amazon to kind of show you what I was describing with the vertical garden. It holds 36 plants. It's approximately $99. And if you have it outdoors, it actually has a line that's included with it, and you can attach it to a hose or a spigot and turn that on, and the water comes out through the top. And then, as shown in the bottom of the picture, there are holes that distribute it down to the next level, to the next level, and to the next level, and so on. Or you can have it indoors and place a drip tray underneath it, and you can water it by hand, but it will still have that same effect of the water circulating down. Okay, and we're going to go on to the next one. Urban gardens continued. I kind of touched base on community gardening a little bit already, but I want to get more into it. Um, so other types of community gardens there are paid subscriptions, and there are urban gardens that are done for communities that are all volunteer bases. They are a designated piece of property within a community for use by its residents. Um, they can be, as I said, nonprofits or volunteers tend to it by tending to the garden and donating funds in order to provide food to those in needs. Um, as far as the paid model goes, usually it's a membership that you are paying, an annual membership, and you are allotted a certain amount of land or space to use within that garden to grow whatever you want. You can bring your family there, you can go once a week, twice a week, whatever the case may be, to tend to your garden plot. And it's not limited, that model is not strictly limited to membership based profit generating models. You can turn the community garden into an activities workshop where people can come and pay to see how to grow plants or start seeds. You can offer classes, you can sell your own seeds. There can be garden tours shown to people to kind of explain how it works. And you can also facilitate this space as a market to allow members to sell their excess produce. And you're asking, how do you make money on that? Well, they are paying you, much like you would pay in a market, you pay to rent the space to set up your excess produce stand that you are selling. So whoever runs the community garden is still generating a profit off of that, as well as the individual um, who grew the produce. And this is just kind of a picture that I found of a local community garden, Bountiful Cities. This is within the Asheville Buncombe Community Garden Network. If you Google that and look that up, you can actually find that there are about 10 or 12 community gardens just located within the area of Asheville itself. Um, Great option for people, and it's a great It's a great way to bring members together for that sense of community that I was talking about with the Victory Gardens in the early 1900s. And now I want to talk about gardening and apartment living. So it's hard to garden when you are confined by small spaces, and it's even harder when those small spaces don't have a good source of direct sunlight. But there are different options for apartment living and gardening. You can have a hanging basket garden. You can have a windowsill garden, which is basically your plants in a pot on the windowsill. You can have a balcony garden, which is pictured. Um, you can have an arrow garden. I'm not going to go too much into detail about the arrow garden, as that was already mentioned in the first agricultural project of future scanning, but it's basically a tabletop hydroponics system that you can grow inside, that has the grow light included in the plants and everything. Rooftop gardening, we've already hit on that, and community gardening within apartments. So some apartments complexes actually offer plots of land available for a fee that you can rent to use, that tenants can rent and use to grow whatever type of produce and vegetables that they would like. And this next slide is really cool. It is lawn gardening. Now, when you think about lawn, you think about grass, but many people are eliminating traditional grass lawns and they're replacing them with fruit and vegetable gardens. So you can see pictured here, this is actually a home in New York where they've removed their entire front lawn and they've replaced it with a fruit and vegetable garden. Depending on city ordinances and your neighbors, this can spark legal battles, which this one did. I believe there was a city ordinance against this, and the neighbors had actually sued these folks over here about the garden. It's petty, right? It's so petty. Like, let folks do what they want to do. It's not ugly. It's just a garden. I think the way around this would be to keep the lawn in place and then to do like raised garden beds or containers in the front lawn, a container garden. So your grass is still there. Technically, you haven't ripped it up, but you can still have a sustainable vegetable garden at home. That's not breaking any laws. Um, so speaking of sustainability, as you know, it was already touched on a little bit, but urban gardening will be essential to the world as the world population continues to grow. They can be created out of many recycled materials that end up in trash, such as milk jugs, plastic bottles, old tires, plastic food containers, aluminum soda cans, vegetable cans, um, anything that something comes in that can be reused as a container can be used for the purpose of gardening. Um, there's also pallet gardening. Pallets are what products are usually delivered to, like grocery stores, or you can see them at gardening centers. They usually have like cinder blocks on them. Those pallets have spaces in between them, and you can fill them up with soil and use them for gardening. Um, Other materials that can be used are old tires. I've even seen old bathtubs used. If you have a sense of humor, you can put a toilet in your front lawn. That's a personal choice right there. That's not going to be me. Um, and then you can also have um, vertical gardens constructed out of concrete cinder blocks. So concrete cinder blocks. Well, I have a picture of it. I'll show you. Moving forward, okay, we have the pallet garden. So as I was saying, there's spaces in between here, and you can basically block off the ends so the dirt doesn't fall out, fill it with topsoil, and then you can plant your plants in between the rows of the pallets. Um, these are great because the rows are already created and it prevents weeds from growing in between your plants. That's a bonus. I think any plant that you can grow and you don't have to weed it, especially a garden, hey, that's less work. Um, And here is the cinder block garden. You can see how they've been stacked and arranged in layers, and then the open spaces have been filled with dirt. This particular one that is shown has been painted. I think it's pretty cool. You can have your garden, but it can also kind of become a focal point or almost like a piece of yard artwork, if you will. Um, that can be a conversation piece, when you have guests over or whatever the case may be. It's just aesthetically pleasing and nice to look at overall rather than here's some cinder blocks. Tire gardens can also be made, and they don't have to be ugly. They can be stacked vertically as shown in the picture. What I actually like about the tire garden is that they have the plants, they're planted in the tire, but they look like they're coming out in between the other layers of the plants. It's a really aesthetically pleasing garden. Um, Old tires can be found for free or relatively cheap. Go to a tire shop. What do they have with all of their old tires, all their bald tires that are worn out? I'm sure some of them would probably be happy to give them to you for free, or for a small fee you can get them, where every time you buy tires on your car, just save the old ones, and take them home and start turning them into containers, if you have the space, if you can. You can also use them as individual planters. They don't have to be stacked up like that. Or you can cut them in half, and then you can arrange them in different patterns. I actually saw like a flower-like shape made when I was doing my research out of them, and you can paint them. They don't just have to be the rubber black color. You can paint them just like you can paint the cinder block gardens. Um, Part of urban gardening and sustainability, I believe, is the ability to be able to compost. When you think about composting, it's usually nasty, it's stinky, it attracts a lot of bugs, and it takes up a lot of space, and it takes up a lot of time. But as we have progressed forward with technology, composting inside of a small space without having any of the unpleasantries has become a reality. So, what is compost? Compost is organic material that's used as fertilizer for plants. The compost is added to the soil mix, and it provides nutrition, and it helps the plants grow healthy and strong. Um, Liquid is also produced from composting, and that liquid is called compost tea. It can be added to water to be used as additional fertilizer for plants. So, some fun facts: food scraps and yard waste combined make up more than 30% of the garbage that is thrown away. Compost keeps compostable materials out of landfills where they are taking up space and releasing methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas contributing to global warming. So for more in-depth details, how to compost, what to compost, and what not to compost, there is a great resource guide on the United States Environmental Protection Agency website. If you just go to the EPA.gov and you type in composting, it will pop up. It's very, very detailed, and it will give you a great idea on how to go about that process. So I want to show you some modern indoor composters. This one is called the bokashi, which means fermented organic matter in Japanese, organko compost bin. So you can see it's just a little bin. It's got a nice little handle on there, so it's easy to pick up to carry. And you can see on the, well, I don't know if you can see, but that's a spout on the bottom to drain the compost tea out of it. Modern compost tea it's much quicker. It takes less space and less time, and it doesn't stink up your home. This particular composter holds it's about a 2.5 gallon capacity. You think about an apartment living, two people, a small home, that is plenty big enough. The container combined with the use of bokashi bran, which are basically these flakes that you sprinkle on top of the compost that are full of microorganisms. They ensure that the food doesn't rot, but rather it ferments because of those microorganisms that are present in the Bokashi brand. It kind of looks like fish food. I don't know, it's cool. The brand actually stops the unpleasant odor as well when you open up the container because everything in there is fermenting as opposed to rotting. The This particular composter produces compost in half the time as traditional composting, and it's ready to use in approximately 10 days. And the cost for this particular bin was less than $100. If you want to get fancier and a little more bougier, we're going to move on to the Lomi composter. Um, she looks so happy to be putting that banana peel in. I'm sorry. I just noticed and I thought it was pretty funny. So Lumi is a composting device that uses technology, and it's specifically designed for the home and to fit on a countertop. Um, it accelerates the composting process using sensors and heat technology to speed up the process of what is added in there. It's odorless and it's easy to use. You literally place the food in the top and you put the lid on and you push a button, and depending on the capacity and how much has been put in there, the compost can be ready to use in as little as 4 hours. So what I think is great about that is you don't have to worry about your compost bin filling up like the bokashi that was just shown. That has a certain level of capacity, but if you have a larger household, I think that the Lumi is more of it's a better option because of the rate that it produces compost. Um, it does use electricity, but according to the facts that I found on their website, Lomi uses 60 kilowatts of energy per 100 cycles, which is less than an Energy Star approved refrigerator in in that it uses in 1 year. So 100 cycles equals 220 pounds of food waste derived from landfill and 18 pounds of methane emissions avoided. It says 100 cycles, but I mean, I figure that's also dependent on how big your family is. So this is very, it's up to interpretation based upon your particular household needs and how often that you use it. Um, it does come with a higher price tag of $450 to $530. Right now, it's actually on sale for $450. But I think what you're paying for is you're paying for that benefit of the rapid ready use uh, compost. And again, I would this is an option for bigger families, I would think. Or you could just buy two bokashis because those are like $89 a pop. Really, you could get two of those for a bigger family and save a lot of money. But if you want to look cool and impress your friends, you can buy the fancier compost option. Um, let's go ahead and move into the future of urban gardening. So this is a rendering that I found from IKEA. Um, a designer, Tom Dixon, partnered with IKEA to develop a modern garden model using traditional gardening knowledge paired with modern technology. This project is literally named Gardening Will Save the World. Gardening Will Save the World is divided into two basic levels. What's shown right here is a photo of the base level. The raised garden level is a botanic oasis comprising of canopy-like ecosystems uh, with trees, flowers, plants, and the plants that are on the top level, they are medicinal plants as well as plants that are good for the environmental or good for the environment. Um, the base garden is a horticulture laboratory which uses hydroponic tech to grow hypernatural edible plants. Hypernatural means rapidly, hyper and natural. Hydroponics, they grow very fast because they're in a controlled climate. You can control the temperature, you control the grow lights, and you control the humidity, and you control the type of nutrition that is in the hydroponic mixture, in the liquid mixture that's being fed to them. Um, and here I'm going to move myself. Here's a rendering of that model actually split in two. So you can see the top layer that I was talking about, and then it goes directly on this bottom layer. So people, you can see folks are actually walking up the top layer. It's more of almost like a park that people can enjoy. But I can imagine the type of trees that can be planted in there could be fruit trees, they could be nut trees, and other beneficial produce producing type of plants. Um, More on IKEA and urban gardening. So IKEA currently sells live plants and many different options to help assist with urban gardening, including pots, watering cans, plant shelves, small balcony space solutions, hanging plant baskets, tools, and many more products specifically designed for small spaces. I believe I saw almost 200 products when I went and looked on IKEA.com. And keeping on brand, the solutions are affordable. I think a lot of problems that folks have who want to garden is the cost of purchasing equipment and whatnot can be overwhelming. It can be expensive, depending on your living situation and what you need to make a garden happen. It could be the cost of grow lights, it could be the cost of shelving, whatever the case may be, but that kind of makes me want to go back and reiterate the fact about all of the recycled materials that can be used to facilitate an urban garden. And I've personally used these. I didn't mention it, but even those plastic containers that pre-washed salad mix comes in, those containers are great for seed germination because they have plastic tops. You can put a layer of soil in there. You can germinate seeds, or you can put holes in the bottom and you can use them as full-on containers to grow plants in. You can also use egg cartons to germinate seeds in because the spaces are so small. After you have crushed your eggs and composted them, you can fill up those little cartons with soil and plant seeds in there to germinate, which can later be transferred to larger plants, or larger, not plants, pots or containers to continue to grow. Um, and to end my presentation, this is just a photograph of what the future of gardening, or it's a rendering, I should say, of what the future of urban gardening will be. As it was discussed, I didn't get too much on the technology side because that was discussed a lot in the agricultural uh, presentation. But as it was stated, these vertical gardens can be monitored with sensors, and there can be an AI, and that can be controlled with smart devices with robots attached to them that are going across back and forth, either spraying for eliminating bugs and spraying the nutrient solution onto them, if it's that type of urban gardening. But this one appears to be a hydroponic vertical garden. Um, I like the fact that the space has been rendered to have picnic tables, and there are people chit-chatting and enjoying the space, much like you would go to a park to have a picnic, or you would go to the beach to enjoy yourself. Even though it is an industrial urban garden, it still has a nice feel to it. It's not just hard looking and industrial. Um, and that is the end of my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it. These are the sources that I used. There's quite a few. I'm not going to go over all of those. And again, thank you so much.